Welcome to the program. Over 4 years ago, the first peace agreement was signed in eastern Ukraine to end the fighting. Since then, more than 10,300 people have been killed and nearly 2 million displaced, and there's sporadic fighting on an almost daily basis. The OSCE mission has been monitoring the situation on the ground in the combat zone in eastern Ukraine for the past 4 years. To talk about the mission's work, we're joined by the Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, Alexander Hug. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
The human cost of the conflict has not been featured in international headlines recently, but one photographer has managed to take some photographs of the toll that the war has taken on the elderly, which are trapped in villages and towns, and I wanted to show you some of the photographs.
We see them on a very regular basis, and I've seen them myself, so this is unfortunately the reality, and a lot of these people have no choice than just to be there, because either they can't afford it or they can't move because they're paralyzed.
Winter is approaching fast. What is the humanitarian situation right now?
I think it's the right point to start this discussion. It is the civilians on both sides of the contact line that still carry the brunt of the violence that continues. There wasn't a single day since the fighting has started that we have seen no ceasefire violations. Every day, since 4.5 years almost, the Special Monitoring Mission has registered that violence continues. And it's the civilians that are living unprotected at the contact line that are most exposed to those risks. Unlike those who conduct the fighting, and even more so those that order or condone it, the civilians have no protection and often face the violence in a way that they do not expect it to happen. Now, we indeed see that the suffering very close to the contact line, in particular within the security zone that is 15 kilometers on each side of the contact line, is very difficult. It is difficult because it's very dangerous because of the continued fighting, but also because of the mines and unexploded ordnance that litters these areas. A lot of people die of these ordnance, of these mines. Most tragically, at the end of September, these 3 kids that died near the entry-exit checkpoint in Mayorsk, what we believe was a mine explosion that took the lives of yet another 3 civilians. This year alone, the Special Monitoring Mission has corroborated over 200 civilian casualties, both injured and dead, and these are 200 too many. Security risks that the civilians face, they also felt the dire situation due to the destruction of the infrastructure they depend on. We see water, gas, electricity supplies regularly hampered and interrupted, and now specifically towards the winter, when it's getting earlier dark, when it's getting cold, people depend on electricity and gas, and often the absence of those basic infrastructure supplies to civilians has severe impacts on their lives.
And you've recently been to the front line, you've seen the situation there. Would you agree with the statement that the ceasefire is not holding?
Well, we document it every day. I don't need to speculate about it. These days we see again the numbers reaching over 4 digits, so over 1,000 per day that we do register. This is significant, and these are only the ones that we register, so the actual number of breaches of an already agreed ceasefire are likely much higher. Each of those rounds fired, each of those explosions that we do register has the potential to maim or kill more civilians or destruct the infrastructure they depend on.
Let's talk a little bit about the OSCE monitors that have been on the ground working in the combat zone. The OSCE special monitors, there have been casualties, they have been threatened, and they have been shot at. How does the OSCE ensure the security and safety of its own workers in the combat zone?
First of all, the work has risks, and we are conscious of that. And it is also up to us to do what we can on our side to mitigate the risks. And that is through proper selection of our staff, through proper training of our staff, through the proper equipment that we provide our staff, armed vehicle, personal protection equipment, but also through proper planning of our work on the ground. But eliminating the risk, not mitigating it, but eliminating, the mission can't do. Only the sites can do that. and they have in fact already committed to do that. They have agreed not to use these indiscriminate weapons, be it the heavy weapons such as tank, mortar, artillery, including multiple launch rocket systems, or then mines. If they would do what they've promised to do, our monitors' safety and security would significantly improve, as it would for any other civilian that lives or has to move around the contact line.
What sort of dialogue do OSCE monitors have with the Russian-led forces?
The mission has an explicit task to facilitate dialogue. So we do speak to everyone in Ukraine. We offer platforms of dialogue, be it direct dialogue or indirect dialogue. And we expect that everyone who participates in that dialogue does so in good faith.
Recently, the OSCE posted a video online which purported to show trucks and convoys heading from Russia into Ukraine. And this video was seen as potential evidence by the Ukrainian government of Russia funneling weapons and manpower into the country across the border. Now, why did the OSCE publish such a video now, and why weren't, surely there's been more incidents of this?
The answer is because there aren't any more than what we have been publishing.
So this is the first video?
That was the first one, but it was not the first time that we have seen specific types of weapons, that we have seen tracks on the ground leading to the unsecure border, that we have seen electronic warfare system that we have described in detail. And if you read through the reports of this week, you will see that we have seen another 2, if not 3, convoys leaving and entering Ukraine.
This is the first piece of evidence that the OSCE has publicly published to show the convoys entering Ukraine illegally.
We do not qualify our facts. Our mandate is to establish facts. The readers of our reports can qualify these facts according to their own conclusions they may draw based on our facts. Our task is to report what we see on the ground. The threshold that we have is that we are not publishing unverified facts. Only verified information is available in our reports. We do not want to add to the rumor mills that are already in abundance available referring to that conflict, or add to speculation or propaganda.
When you look back, what do you think has been some of your mission's successes that you've been spearheading? And what would you say have been some of the setbacks and you wish you had accomplished during your time here?
I'm looking back to these 4.5 years of service with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and its field operation here in Ukraine, of course, with a mixed feeling. When I arrived here, there was no conflict, no open conflict in the eastern part of your country. That was in March 2014. And of course, over the past 4.5 years, I've seen this conflict evolving from protest to a full-fledged armed conflict that still continues to this day, unabated every day, ever since this conflict has started. The most difficult part to accept is that civilians still suffer in this conflict, and that civilians tell us every time that they think the same. They tell us it is not their conflict. They tell us they don't understand why it is continuing. The most astonishing thing, the most amazing aspect in the past 4.5 years is to see how resilient Ukrainians are, regardless of their political agenda or their position, and in fact where they live, be it in Lviv or Luhansk. All of them are resilient, and by far all, with a few exceptions though, but the vast majority tell us when we ask them that they identify themselves as Ukrainians. So I believe the Ukrainians themselves are the biggest hope for this conflict to end. And we know, and we have established it in thousands of daily reports, that the sides have it in their hands entirely to end the military technical side of this madness at any point in time in very, very, very quick succession from a decision taken to the implementation off the ground.
Moments ago you said a lot of Ukrainians, that the majority of Ukrainians that you've spoken with in the areas occupied by the Russian-led forces, they said that they identify as Ukrainians. Is that something that you've heard from from the OSCE monitors?
I can speak on my behalf, and I speak to Ukrainians that I see in these areas, and they tell it to me. There are of course exceptions, so I have to be true to their word too. Some of them don't do that, but the vast majority tells us that they identify themselves as Ukrainians. They may have a different view of how the conflict should be resolved politically and what the system should look like, whether it should be like it was before, there should be greater autonomy, there should be other types of political arrangements. There we have a wide spectrum of views. They differ. There is no uniformity there. But what is uniform is that they identify themselves, again with a few exceptions, but the vast majority identify themselves, at least in our conversations that we have, as Ukrainians. Now have to be also very clear that we are not conducting polls. So these are the random exchanges that we have in villages close to the contact line with people you would think they are full of anger and are stressed out, but still both they're not developing hate against Ukrainians on the other side. They may have a view on the government or on the government side on the armed formations. Yes, that is true. But still, they're not developing hate towards their Ukrainian compatriots on the other side of the contact line. And look at the fact that up to 40,000 Ukrainians cross this contact line on a single day. That is unseen in other conflicts, where normally the contact line is a division line, it's a separation line. It doesn't seem to be the case here. It's clear fact that the people don't believe in this conflict, don't believe in this line. It is a harsh reality they face every day when they have to cross it or when they have to experience and endure the fighting, but they don't accept it, otherwise they wouldn't cross that line so frequently.
Just last question, what would you say was the watershed moment for your organization, for the international media, for all of the different officials that you've spoken to in the conflict?
There is not one. And I think every tragic incident, in particular when that concerns civilians and even more so kids, then these are watershed moments, and they should be for everyone that pays attention to this conflict. Every bullet fired, every civilian injured, every civilian killed should be a wake-up call to those who need to make this decision to end it immediately. I think these watershed moments happen on a daily basis, and it is time now that those who have promised to end it will do so, and the mission will continue to document whether they do so or not.
Some very, very strong points. Thank you so much for joining me today, Mr. Hug.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Today we were joined by Mr. Alexander Hug. He is the Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission here in Ukraine, and you're watching UATV.